Welcome to the Brew Knowledge Podcast, brought to you by Brewlogix. Throughout the industry of craft, better education and skills help us stay at the top of our game. But what practical knowledge and skills do we really need? Our next guest is an industry veteran and leader. She's here to teach us what's missing in our knowledge base and where to find it. But first, Dan had another great question.
All right, welcome back to another episode of What is in Dan's Mind that he has to ask his good friends Jeremy and Josh. So today's episode, I want to ask you guys something that really leans into your true professional backgrounds, and it goes along the lines of education. And I've had the opportunity to do some trainings and some staff trainings with different businesses out there along my travels of sales and marketing, and had some really fun moments, and also some moments where people didn't look like they were paying much attention to me. So you got to learn how to get the crowd involved there. But Josh, to start with you, part of your background in education, give me some moments or some highlights, or pick on one here that really brought you full circle of like all this time and effort that you've taken into training yourself on how to become better educated on products and other parts of the business. What has been a shining moment for you that really made things click together and you just went home like, this is what I'm in it for. This is why I do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's always fun to work with industry professionals, people who, are just looking to push their limits because it allows you to kind of utilize that knowledge base or allows me to utilize that knowledge base that I've tried to grow. But I would say like the biggest fun, kind of full circle moment is there's been a couple times where I've done some really fun food and beer pairings at on-premise establishments. And to me, that's a really fun way to have it come full circle because you get to go in, you get to spend time with the chef, the GM, the bar manager, and kind of nerd out a little bit about flavors and how beer interacts with food, which is really fun. And then, so you do get to go a little bit deeper with their team, letting them know about the beers, the romance, what to expect from it. And then you get to showcase all of that again with the staff at the event itself. So executing the actual pairing, bringing in consumers and allowing you to go into those stories. And I think for me, one of the best moments was we were doing a Cicerone versus sommelier dinner, and I had presented up front, and we were doing a wine and beer with each course. And after I had presented, I went back to my table to sit down and enjoy the pairing. And I heard the staff at the table next to us telling more of the story than what I had already introduced in my part, because they remembered from when we had the conversation. So they were excited to share the information with the customer. And the customer was super stoked to know something that maybe the rest of the room didn't know because I hadn't presented it. So to me, it's that full circle moment where you get to share a story, share an experience, share some knowledge, with the goal and the hopes that the person you're sharing it with gets to in turn share that with somebody else. And that really, to me, is a full circle moment. That's exciting to see.
The transfer of knowledge and to see it happening like in front of your eyes would be a moment that you would treasure for a long time. Jeremy, what about you in your educational travels here?
God, I'm trying to go through my catalog of stories and trying to be very judicious with it. I've got a lot of moments that could answer this well. And to Josh's point, a lot of it has to do with sharing some knowledge that it's one thing to go to the table and say, well, this is a Kolsch. A Kolsch comes from Cologne, Germany, and a Kolsch can only be, that's not stuff that people remember. That's not. I mean, some people would kind of have some fun with it, but that's. We need a little bit more of Josh's romance with that too. And I think one of my favorite things is I recently, for the past almost a year, I've been teaching a class a month at a local beer store, and I have people that have been coming back to each and every class, and one of them, the one I just did recently, we're recording this in November of 2024, and I just taught the last class I taught was on how to pair beer for holiday feasts and stuff like that. And really the class was how to think about it, how to evaluate the pairing, how to think about it in such a way. And I could see so many, by the comments, by the conversation afterwards, I could see so many people just kind of lighting up because they showed up thinking they were going to get this goes with that, wash, rinse, repeat. And I told him, we're not doing that. We are going to help you understand how to think about this, because maybe you are going to have a Pinot Noir with your feast instead of a Maibach, and you can apply those same principles. And so I really appreciated that. But that aha moment, when that comes, and you know that the training that you give to someone, and you create something experience, something that makes them want more, something that turns them from a customer to a raving fan, turns them from someone who showed up for dinner to, I'll be back next Thursday, and the Thursday after that, and the Thursday after that. And a recent moment was in one of these classes. I had a couple show up just out of curiosity. He was into beer, she wasn't. They started coming to almost every single class. And at the end of that class, the beer pairing, she mentioned that it had been 10 years since she last had the St. Bernardus Abbot 12, and she loved that beer. She knew there was a monk on it, but she couldn't remember what it was. She could never find it until this class. She's like, finally, thanks to you, I found this. And we also had triple Carmelite for that class as well. And she just looked at me very emphatic. Her eyes were very emphatic. She like locked on like a tractor beam. And she said, that is the best beer I have ever had. And she showed up to my classes not liking beer or not caring much about beer. And so when you have that moment, when you share that, not the knowledge, when you share that experience, and then you turn that customer into a raving fan, and you create an experience that they are then going to go forward and share that experience, you effectively create an army of experiential leaders. And that's, for me, what this is all kind of about.
One thing I look back in some of my days, and just trying to, even going back to when I was selling wine, I feel like sometimes you're afraid to guide people because you may think they might have a bad experience. But I think that's something, as I got older, that I learned, like, you have to share that experience, and they have to make their own decision if they want to move forward with, that food pairing or whatever it is. But don't be afraid to share a little more details. The old white wine, white fish, red, wine, red fish, or, light beer with a lighter meal. Like, be a little more directive, give them some more guidance, and let them really experience it on their own, because I don't think anybody's going to, come back to you and say, "Hey, this was terrible. I can't believe you said it." So, but
I,
obviously, taking the lead from you guys is a little more, a little. You guys have a lot more education behind what you're pitching out there.
well, and it really comes down to, I heard a musician say to the crowd that I was part of once, that there are no mistakes, only brilliant recoveries.
It's
And I
what
think the
is
same is true with pairing and beer.
it's the artist. I can't remember his name. Happy Little Mistakes.
Bob Ross.
Yeah, Bob
Yeah.
Ross.
Bob Ross. Happy Little Mistakes.
Yeah, I think that's the thing
So
too, just to bring it full circle, is, giving people a little bit of a structure, a little bit of a concept, but then, also empowering them to go wild, I think is the best
Yes.
part. When
yeah,
you think about the variety of music, when you think about the variety of art, that all comes from a base level knowledge that then someone decided to push one way or another, and then we just continue to push. So yeah, I think from an experiential standpoint, that's the best thing you can do, is you can just help someone lay the groundwork and then encourage them to go out and discover for themselves. And I think Jeremy hit the nail on the head. Oftentimes people think that they're going to learn, this is exactly how you do this. Well, the reality is there is no exact. And so just giving people that knowledge alone is a really exciting thing. And then, hopefully you're lucky enough to have them come share something with you, and you're like, oh, okay, I'm going to go try that now too. So
Yeah.
it is really fun. And I think that's the best part about this category, is it allows you to go and do some fun things and share those with others.
love it, gentlemen. We're gonna jump into Mirella Amato, who's obviously given a lot of experiences in her day. So, thank you for your time, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Cheers.
Cheers.
The Brewlogix craft beverage community drives on-premise profitability through our unified technology platforms. Go to brewlogix.com to get started.
And now, our interview with Master Cicerone and WSET Senior Business Development Manager for Beer, Mirella Amato. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brew Knowledge Podcast. Dan's here again, as always, and today we're going to introduce you to a friend of ours, Mirella Amato. For the five of you in the world that don't know who she is, she's a Master Cicerone. She is recently crowned a Master BJCP judge. She's a beer sommelier. Yes, with the crown. She is a beer consultant, beer educator, the author of the book Beerology, the creator of the Mastering Beer and Food Pairing course from Beerology. And she is also, and this is a big reason why we asked her here today, Mirella, you're also the Senior Business Development Manager for the WSET as it pertains to beer. Now, the WSET just recently introduced their certifications for beer within the last, I think that officially launched last year. And so you have been really pushing the charge for that for longer than, um,
This
well,
year.
how about a year ago? About a year ago. I'm in about, but fill in any gaps or clarify anything that I've kind of goofed up a little bit.
No, that's fine. We actually launched in February, so that's just a few months ago. Not quite a year.
Well, and actually, so
6 months ago, so half a
well,
year.
and you were so kind to invite me to join in the original pilot group, uh, so we got to kind of test out the whole process, and that was last year. So it feels like longer to me because it was longer
Ah,
for
yes.
me. So
Yes.
it's like it's nice that we're both right on in this regard. But but thank you so much for being here.
Yes.
Oh, it is my pleasure. It's always a joy to speak to you, Jeremy, and Dan. It's lovely to meet you.
You as
Yeah.
well.
So Dan has some business questions that were queued up, but with your blessing, Dan, I kind of want to kick off. Uh, after our intros, you have been in the beer education game for a while now. You are responsible for enlightening many people as to the beer, the flavors of beer, the point of beer, sensory. You've done a lot of work in this industry for a while, and we're eternally grateful because we definitely need this. But really, the question I will ask is, why do we need this? What is? There's a lot of knowledge that one could attain. One could go out and get their master Cicerone, the master BJCP judge. But for people in the beer industry, the bartenders, the servers, the distributors, the brewery reps, the anywhere along those lines, what kind of practical beer knowledge do we need, and what is the value of that?
I think that basic beer knowledge is not only extremely valuable, it's indispensable. And it's so apparent the difference in experience and just in general tone between coming into an establishment where the staff knows beer, they're passionate about beer. You ask a question, they've got 10 answers, they have to rein themselves in, or they don't know the answer and they have to ask someone else and they grab a couple of different things to sample and they're showing you what's going on. And that's just a really amazing experience and one that I really associate with craft beer, particularly, but also just with local business and small business, is that passion piece. And so then going into an establishment that serves a wide range of beers and asking a question, and the person at the table just doesn't know, and then they're uncomfortable, and then it feels weird, and I just it's not fun as a consumer, and I'm quite confident it's not fun as someone who works around beer. So my work in beer is interesting because, as you mentioned, I've really taken the time to complete many certifications myself. But my goal from the beginning in beer has always been to raise just the median level of knowledge, just to get as many people as possible within the industry, but also originally and certainly with my book, um, just the anyone who enjoys beer or drinks beer, just to get to the enough information to confidently navigate a selection, which sounds really basic, but it's something we still need to work on. So included in that definitely is style knowledge, just basic style knowledge, and then an basic enough understanding of the brewing process to be able to then navigate beers that maybe aren't quite to style, or, this beer is like this, but it's dry hopped. Okay, I know what that means. Or this
Yeah.
beer is like this, but it was lagered. Okay, I know what that means. I know how that's going to impact the flavor profile. So, on on one hand, I could say that's very basic beer knowledge, but even that, what I've just said, is a chunk,
Yeah.
right? It's just that's a lot of information. And so, yeah, I think it's very important for anyone who works around beer to feel confident in their work and to feel able to tackle questions. And I think, that's probably true of any job.
Well, and I kind of think, and Dan, I'm going to set you up for your question that you have, but this kind of reminds me of, going into, at least back in my day, we would go into a bookstore or a coffee shop or even a record store, where there were those big ones where you go in and you ask a question and they look up on the computer. It's like, oh, it's over in that section's near the corner. You can go find it on your own. Versus, and I remember having this experience in college many years ago. But I remember I was really into Jane's Addiction back in college, and I was talking to the guy about this at this record store, and he said, "Oh, you got to check this out." And he pulled out this double-sided record that was a recording from a concert they did in Japan with some songs that they had recorded live with some different like B-sides that do not exist anywhere else. You can't find them currently streaming. You can't find them anywhere else. They were on this record and this record only. And it was that kind of attention, there was that kind of knowledge, that if I just want to go into a big bookstore and find a book or a journal, great. But if I need I need someone to kind of take me on this journey, that's where it needs to be a little bit more specialized. Can we assume that beer is kind of along those same lines?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I would point out two things there. One, you remember that interaction,
Yeah.
right? And you did mention it was back in the day. I won't ask how long ago it was, but I'm going to guess it wasn't a few weeks ago, right? But that interaction
I,
has
I did
really,
say I did say Jane's Addiction, so wow.
yeah. That's true. Do you remember which store that was?
It was on campus, and
Okay.
so
It was
the
your
name was,
campus store.
yeah.
Right. But the point being, you still remember that and you remember where it happened,
Yeah.
right? So when we're talking about building a brand and differentiating yourself, being able to provide an experience like that, that's invaluable. Um, there was something else I was going to say, but I forget. So you were talking about getting into, yeah. So you also discovered something new there, right? That you
Yeah.
wouldn't have discovered otherwise. And so that's, I think, also an important parallel, especially in beer, when, I mean, it's an industry that's in constant flux. There's always new beers, new techniques, new ingredients, new everything coming along. So not only is it important for staff to understand and be able to follow along with what's going on, it's equally amazing to then be able to introduce a customer to something like that and to create that excitement. So I think that's an important parallel to make there
Yeah.
too.
Cool.
Leaning into what you just said to create an experience, I think that's something that a lot of tap rooms they strive to do, whether that's through their beer or just purely like when you're in the tap room and the things and the activities you have to do there. What are some of the key elements that you see or that you would maybe hope for or educate to for some of these staff members to really lean into? I think you kind of said you want to move people up to the median of education, but what are some of those main things? You said style, but can you help like how you foresee or how you would want to see the industry move to when it comes to experience through the product itself? Is it, to Jeremy's point, taking them on a trip to something new? Is it educating a little bit? Hey, do you know how this beer was made? What are some of those experiences you just would value to see more of out in the industry?
Well, I mean, there are many things you could do on site. Generally, tap rooms have more than one beer on tap, and so there's a lot of opportunity to present different beers. I think I think there is a large value though in having just a brand neutral training uh, in beer, and the reason I say this is because, of course, as different brands come in, they might highlight different pieces of what's going on. So
Right.
this, there's X is very important about this beer and Y is very important about this beer. But to really process that information and to be able to communicate it effectively, you need a context uh, around that. And so I firmly believe that just really an entry level, here are the four main ingredients in beer. Here's how each one of them can uh, impact the flavor profile of a beer. And you can do that dry if you want. But if you've got that selection of beers in front of you, it's as easy as one day. Okay, well, let's take this beer, which is golden in color and just brewed with base malt, and this beer that is brewed with a more complex grain bill, and let's just talk about grains and taste these few things. Um, and then as people are going about their day and about their shift, then they can be like, I know this one's made with base malts. I know this one, and then you sort of build on that a little bit, piece by piece. And then styles, it takes time. But again, I think I am a firm believer that some kind of course is useful just to create that foundation to then build upon. Books also work, but it takes a certain temperament, I think, to read through a book. And also, depending on people's learning styles, it might not click in the same way. You really have to drink beer to understand it.
I'm glad you said that, because I am one that does not learn well through reading. I learn well through just experiencing in my own self. And so going through some wine classes earlier in my life, it really helped me to open my palate by learning, by tasting, wine with food, and then getting into beer. It's the same thing. It's tasting the beer, it's pairing it with suggestions. So leaning into that a little bit, and something that you have built is the beer and food pairing. And I think that as tap rooms are becoming more hospitality driven, food's becoming a main part of their operations. Can you not to give away your course, because I think there's still a lot of value to that, but give some like basics that like some taproom managers can just, if they have a burger menu, like what are some of the easy wins, or like the simple things that you can get to? Like I remember with wine, it was fish with white wine, red meat with red wine. That was that basic kind of knowledge. Do you have anything that you could share, just basic, that like you want to start improving your program and getting a food pairing with your program? Here's where you should just start.
Yeah, for sure. This is not from my course because my course is not really basic. It is an introduction to how to pair beer with food, but it really takes you through like step by step how to actually do it, which is something that I think has been missing in the beer and food pairing literature. A lot of beer and food pairing literature is just this pairs well with this, and this pairs well with that, and this. I'll get back to that later, but it's generally a symptom of the way that beer education has been happening in our industry. It's just like these tiny little pieces here and there. But what I will share, I'm going to answer your question first, and then I'll get back to that. The one thing that I can share, it's in my book, actually. It's something I just noticed I was doing one day. So I call it Mirell's rule of thumb. But you can line up the color of your beer, the depth of color of your beer with your main protein in the dish. So if your beer is golden in color, it's likely to go well with like a white fish or a chicken. If it's amber in color, then you can get into like your salmons or your pork. If it's brown, then it'll go well with beef or lentils. And then if it's dark, then you getting into probably chocolate and dessert. So that's just a really easy cheat. The only thing you have to be aware of when you're using it is intensity.
Yeah.
So obviously, let's say like at a golden color, you can get a beer like a light lager, which is light and refreshing, and it'll go well with just like a chicken salad or a chicken sandwich. Or you can have something like a triple, which is a similar color, but way higher alcohol, way more intense, way more going on. And so that'll be more for like a more saucy, rich dish, but still with that chicken.
Love it.
Yeah, so that's a good departure point. And to be honest with you, I don't know why it works, but it does. I mean, it's something that in my early days was just how I would quickly cheat to figure it out.
It's easy to remember. And I want you
Yeah.
to finish on what you were saying, though, before you answer my question. I was interested in that.
Yeah. So there's because I've spent a lot of time trying to figure out why education is not as valued in our industry, and why it really seems to be considered okay to put people, in front of customers serving beer and like not explain to them the basics of beer. And I think there's two pieces to that. One is that a lot of the information that, and we're going like way back historically speaking, but the way that beer would be sold was more based on marketing than on its properties. So I'm talking back, in the days when before craft beer, this is what craft beer reacted to, right? Was a sea of golden lagers. And so I think establishments became used to breweries just telling them like, these are the selling points for this beer versus that beer versus that beer. And so,
Features and benefits.
and so so people are getting a lot of tidbits, and I know that with my book, for example, the most common comment I will get from people reading it is, I'd heard so many things about beer, and then I read your book and it all kind of clicked. It all makes, and it's again just that basics piece. But the other important factor, I think, is that for the longest time there hasn't really been an entry level course for beer. If I think about when I was, first of all, when I was studying beer, I had to take a wine course because there were no beer tasting courses. So I took a wine tasting course. But with the Cicerone certifications that I took, I was self-taught with my BJCP. I had to teach myself. And, a lot of the programs that were out there are designed for people who want to brew beer, for home brewers,
Yep.
or designed by home brewers, which is like a completely different spectrum of knowledge than you need to just enjoy what's in the glass. And so a huge part of my work has been trying to simplify beer and to refocus beer education on what's in the glass and what does a drinker need to know. Someone who's just wants to enjoy this pint, doesn't necessarily want to learn how to brew it, doesn't necessarily need to understand how to troubleshoot the tap if that's what's going on, or doesn't need all this extraneous information. Just like, what do you need to know to appreciate what's in front of you in that glass?
Do you,
And that, going back to your question, Jeremy, like those are the basic things that I feel anyone working around beer should just be comfortable around it.
I love where you went with that, and I agree with it. I'm eager to know, do you think things have changed in the past 5-10 years to where people are more, they don't want to learn so much about brewing, but they do want to figure out how to enjoy beer? I think in to what I said, like how staff members are selling the experience of craft beer. Has that changed?
Absolutely.
Have you seen that?
And I would say it's been longer than that.
Okay.
It's been a good while, and the issue has been there hasn't really been a course designed for that until now. What? See what I
I
did
love it.
there?
Yes.
You'll love this. I was just speaking to a young lady who's just getting out of college, and she was talking about why is you go to a nice restaurant, there's a wine list, there's a cocktail list, but there's never a beer list. And she's wanting to get into craft beer, and that's kind of her mission. And I'm really proud to know that someone young noticed a lot of what me and Jeremy have spoke on. I'm sure you've definitely spoke on it too, but
Yeah.
there's definitely room for growth in craft beer, and a lot of it just has to do with education and experience and getting that into the right hands of people. So hats off to that. I'm very excited for that next generation to see what they do with it too. So Jeremy, I'll let you
Beer is
run.
very yummy.
Yeah.
Very
Well,
young.
and before we get to another component, one thing I will say for all of you watching and listening, I did take Mirella's beer and food pairing course when she first offered it, and I took it after completing and passing the advanced Cicerone. And I remember I asked you questions or emailed you like, well, is this really for me? I've just, this is the point where I'm at with this. And we talked about it, and I ended up taking it, and I was so glad I did, because it does offer that a better, deeper understanding of beer and food pairing for people who have some experience, but it's going to gently bring you along that path. It helps to have some experience, But even after, passing the advanced Cicerone, there were things that, I didn't think about it in this context. I didn't think about it in that manner, and I got a lot out of it. So it really was a great course. So there's my
Shout out.
sales pitch. There's my sales pitch for the course. It was fantastic. Um,
I appreciate that. And, I think a lot of what I do is maybe not on the surface doesn't look different, but the philosophy behind it is always very, very different and really geared towards this accessibility piece in terms of making sure that things are understandable and practical.
Yeah,
Right.
and taking this esoteric skill
Yeah.
set and knowledge set and putting it in a step by step manner so that we could deconstruct it. We can kind of work through it in a rational, pragmatic manner, and I really appreciated that. Even though I'm very comfortable with the foofy, it was nice to have a structure to follow when foofy failed me. But speaking of courses, I want to know more, and so full disclosure, I'm biased, and thanks to you, Mirella, I am now a WSET online beer instructor. So that's my disclaimer. But tell us about the WSET. Tell us exactly it is and how it kind of fits into this whole global beer education piece.
Yeah, WSET is a drinks education organization, and the company has been around since '69. And originally, there was a course that was a wine course with a beer component and I think a spirits component. Um, and over the years, with beer and spirits becoming increasingly interesting and varied, the company started separating the different streams. So now we have a wine stream, we have spirit stream, we have a sake stream, which I am very excited to learn about. That's on my to do list for this year. And now, as of February, beer courses. And the company actually brought me on as a consultant, as I think you mentioned earlier, Jeremy. I'm a consultant in sensory and in beer education. And so they brought me in a number of years ago to help consult on building the products. And it was a really cool experience for me because I do have this different approach to beer that is really focused on what's in the glass. And I, came out of the gate with my philosophy, and it ended up lining up really well with what the company generally does and their approach. And if I had to really boil down what WSET teaches and how we do it, is that we do taste training in a very deliberate fashion. So we have a level ones, level twos. Beer only goes up to level 2, but in other streams we have a level 3. And we slowly build tasting skills throughout that. And in parallel, we build basic knowledge of ingredients and process. And then we interweave the two to build a really strong understanding of the beverage. So that's really, I would say, what's at the core of WSET and why it was such a great fit for me and for my philosophies. And so, yeah, I've completely forgotten what you asked me, but
Oh,
that's what I have so far. And I'll let maybe stop talking so that.
I
Well,
have a
the
question.
question was, what did you have for breakfast? But I like your answer anyway.
um, if our audience as a tap room, operators and both breweries and just restaurants and bars, what does that look like if someone says, you know what, I'm really intrigued on what you guys just said. How, what is this a 6 month, process? Is this a couple months? What does that look like going through that WSET for beer?
So, here's the beauty. We did create an introductory course. So our level 1 for beer is 6 hours. It's 6 hours. And it's actually a lot, as probably you both know this already, but it is way harder to create a 6-hour beer course than it is to create a 30-hour beer
Got
course.
to pack it in there.
Right? I've it's never ceases to amaze me, when you're teaching a class and someone like asks a question and it kicks open a door and all of a sudden it's like, I remember once someone
Oh,
asked me about a question about foam and I wasn't quite sure. I said, let me go back and research that and get back to you tomorrow. And it came down to like quantum physics. Um, you know, um,
I love beer.
yeah. But the point being, we do have this level 1 that's just 6 hours. You can do it just in one day, or you can sometimes it's in 2 half days. It's also available online. And with that course, it's just a very basic overview of beer production and beer ingredients. Just again, just what you need to know to just start understanding what's in front of you. Um, and then we cover, I think, 20 beer styles at that first level. Then we have a level 2. And very important to mention, you don't need to complete level 1 to complete level 2. You can choose your own adventure. Level 2 is 16 what we call guided learning hours. So that means it's 16 in class hours, but we do recommend study outside of that. And WSET has a textbook, which usually sits on my desk right here, but it's in a drawer right now, so I won't grab it. But we have the textbook, and we recommend studying it, and in addition to the class time where we do lectures and, of course, the tastings, weave it all together. And yeah, both of them have an exam, obviously, that you have to pass to get your credential, and then you get your certificate and your little pin, because
Off and
pins
running.
are important.
Yes, we love our pins in this industry.
Sure do.
No, we
Pins and
really do.
books, right?
Yeah.
I think we
And
must be the only industry that still uses, like I still buy beer books quite regularly. Well, that's just me. Okay.
Yeah, no, I just bought 2 in the
Okay.
last
All right. Yeah.
3 months.
Yep.
It helps when you know the author. But,
Yes.
um,
So yes, so the level 1 is 6 hours, and level 2 is 16 hours.
and
And level 1 is just enough to really when you went through the pilot for, I think it was the level 2, Jeremy, I did put a couple of people I know through the level 1 pilot, non-beer people, and they come back to me every once in a while and just say, like, I just feel so much less lost when I look at a beer selection now. It's really cool. And that's just wonderful feedback to hear from that level 1. I think I'm very hopeful that it's going to invite more people to build that confidence and to dive in to beer, because it's so delicious.
I think that's something that I found out. Even if I didn't work in the industry, I learned how to enjoy beer more. And I think that even if you're not wanting to work in the industry, you just want to enjoy the beverage of beer. If you learn more about it, I think you appreciate it more, and you can understand more of what you're going to what you're expected to drink and how it's supposed to taste and all of those great things. And obviously food pairings just makes everything better. But it is, I think you don't have to be in the industry to take this course and enjoy it and get something out of it.
well,
Yes,
and
certainly not. Yeah.
I'll piggyback that, Dan, and then give you the final word, Mirella. But you know, honestly, and this does sound a little woo woo or foofy, but learning more about beer, learning the nuance of beer, it makes you more attuned to nuance. It makes you more attuned to detail that you can then apply to listening to music, tasting wine. I mean, my skills of tasting wine have gotten so much better since I've become a good taster of beer. Tasting chocolate, tasting anything, looking at color, thinking about light, in terms of like a photographer. When you kind of get used to training yourself to look for like the minutia, then the minutia everywhere starts revealing itself to you. And I find that really, really interesting, a really interesting experience that I've had.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, it'll only enrich your life. It's like learning a new language, or it just opens the mind in a different way. And I think education is a wonderful thing. But in the case of someone who's, in the industry, I think it's a critical piece.
Yeah.
Sure.
And, there is that wonderful sense of discovery, but more importantly is that sense of confidence in what you do, and in what you're expected to talk about.
Love it.
Perfect. Well, before we close, where can people find you? Where can people find these WSET courses, your beer and food pairing course as well?
I'm Beerology everywhere. So if you're a social media person, my course is beerology.thinkific.com, but I'm sure if you look for beerology and beer and food pairing, you'll find it. My book is available everywhere. It's called Beerology, Everything You Need to Know to Enjoy Beer Even More. Are we detecting a theme here? Yes. And WSET, we have a number of course providers. So if you go on our website, which is wsetglobal.com/where to study, you can click on the map of wherever you are in the world, because we have providers all over the world, and see if there's someone offering a beer course near you. Otherwise, there's also the online option, which is also on that website.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing your incredible wealth of knowledge on, especially on this particular subject. It's always a pleasure talking to you, and it's nice to hear this story again and again and again. I've been banging this drum for a while, and it's nice to have reinforcements.
The advice on this show is obviously not a one-size-fits-all solution. The goal is to provide ideas that will either work for you or stimulate other ideas on how you can improve your business. We hope these conversations were helpful, but let us know what works well for you. Until next time, cheers.